This year our story is based off of Frankenstein. Have any of you attended this event before? Or is this the first time? You guys have been here? Great. So some of you know what to expect. For some of you, this is a new experience. So tonight, first we want to thank you for being here, for helping to support Evergreen Heritage and all the preservation work that goes on at this cemetery, and also Fairview Cemetery across town. It takes a lot of effort to keep these cemeteries beautiful and nice and everything, and this is just one way we can do it. So we appreciate that you've come out, one, to enjoy this event and kind of kick off spooky season with us, but also to support the cemetery. And also we have young actors that are involved with us. They're high school students or recently graduated high school students. So this is also allowing them to hone their acting skills along with our professional actors. So it's a very fun event. So we really appreciate you coming out tonight. So for those of you who are new to this experience, we start here in the chapel. You'll have your first two performers here. You'll go downstairs. You'll be able to get some popcorn and cider to go with you. You'll go out through the back way from downstairs. Your wagon will be waiting for you there. We'll get you loaded on and you'll see the rest of the show. And then it will drop you back off up here near where you guys are parked. So please get back to your cars when we're done. So thank you once again for supporting us and enjoy the show.
Good evening. My name is Percy Fish Shelley, and welcome to Beyond the Grave and our films and reenactment of my wife's, Mary Shelley's, Frankenstein. And before we start, I assume you would like to know about both myself and my wife, correct? Yeah. Well, I am Percy Fish Shelley, as I have just said, and I speak to you from beyond the veil. In my brief time on Earth, I became a renowned English poet and philosopher. Growing up in a wealthy family, I challenged many societal norms, both through my writing and through what I sought to speak on my mind. And it was always something I rebelled against, both societal norms, conventional thinking, and all manner of just stuff that I thought should change. But at 21, I eloped and later married Harriet Westbrook, and our union, though met with turmoil, was fair. Though I soon grew tired and started an affair with a Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin. And it was in 1812 that I went to France with her, but during that time, tragedy struck later in 1816 as my previous wife, Harriet, drowned herself. But it was shortly then after that I married Mary. Well, Mary. And it was our deep intellectual connection and just our connection on philosophy in general that sparked an enduring relationship that was met with some personal turmoil. But that was about it for my life when suddenly, in 1822, at the age of 29, I suddenly died drowning from a sailing accident. But it did not dissuade Mary, who continued my work and preserved my legacy. And tonight, you'll be going through one of her most enduring works, Frankenstein. And whilst you, Evan, said that you would go down those stairs and receive popcorn and cider, do keep in mind we do have some safety precautions for you to follow once you leave here. That is, stick to your group, stay on the trailer, and if anything does arise, please alert your driver as calmly but as quickly as possible. But enough about that. My time on this earth is short. And, well, I thank you for coming. And as I once said to my wife, two hearts which near each other move from evening close to morning light. The night is good because, my love, they never say good night.
'Tis an honor to reflect on my work here, of all the places that I have been to. In fact, my father, he taught me to read and write by tracing the letters on my mother's headstone with my little fingers. I often wonder what my life would have been had I not been born to such a family. It is no singular event that, as the child of two persons of distinguished literary celebrity, that I should have thought of writing early in life. As a child, I scribbled, and my favorite pastime during the hours given to me for recreation was to write stories. My father, William Godwin, he was a writer and later recognized as a philosopher, and my mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, she was known as a trailblazer of women's rights. And so their values drove me to pursue my own similar path. And I was blessed with the influence of intellectuals of my time, such as William Wordsworth, Thomas Paine, and John Adams. But for all of its blessings, my life behind the pen has not been without its hardships. My father can attest to the challenges that my mother's untimely passing brought upon us, and then one of my most enduring struggles was with the woman to whom he remarried, who could only treat me as though she was viciously jealous of my relationship with her husband. So these things left their mark. But as a teenager, I lived primarily in the countryside, away from them, and I passed considerable time in Scotland, and while I did visit the most picturesque parts on occasion, my habitual residence was on the blank and dreary shores of the Tay, near Dundee. Blank and dreary I call them in retrospect. They were not so to me then. No, they were the area of freedom where, unbidden, I could commune with the creatures of my fancy. And then, when I was 16, I moved back to my father's residence in London, and it was there and then that my life was forever changed. That was the year my father sought the patronage and granted some mentorship to one Percy Bysshe Shelley. My father, he had hoped that Percy's wealth would lift him out of debt and then further support his writing endeavors, but what my father did not ask for and could not have foreseen was the spark of ardent passion between Percy and I. I must admit, Percy was already married by the time that we met. Though estranged, with one young child and another on the way. But I cannot describe the magnetism between the two of us. We knew then that our bond was undeniable. So we fell deeply in love. So deeply that Percy made the bold decision to divorce his wife, Harriet, to run away with me. Oh, it happened so fast, and by the time we were married in 1816, I was just 18. And so, I'm sure you can understand our society's reaction was fierce. We were ostracized, shunned by friends and family alike. Even my own father, who had railed against the institution of marriage, despite marrying twice himself, he could not reconcile his personal beliefs with my personal scandal. And so, Percy and I chose to flee to France and then to Switzerland, only to avoid the whispers and judgmental gazes. It was there in Switzerland that we met our good friend Lord Byron, who we learned was no stranger to scandal himself. His reputation at home had been tarnished by rumors of immorality, but even accusations of incest. In coming to know him so deeply, Percy and I found those accusations flippant and exaggeratory at best, but in our shared exile, we spent the first of our pleasant hours on the lake near our home, or wandering its shores. But it quickly proved to be a wet and ungenial summer, and incessant rain often confined us for days to the house. So, some volumes of ghost stories fell into our hands. There was the tale of the inconstant lover who, when he finally thought to clasp the bride to whom he had pledged his vows, he found himself in the arms of the pale ghost of her whom he had deserted. And then, though I cannot remember its title, there was the story of the sinful founder of his race, whose miserable doom it was to bestow the kiss of death on all of the younger sons of his house. Eternal sorrow sat upon his brow as he bent down and kissed each of the boys who from that hour withered like flowers snapped upon the stalk. I have not seen these stories since then, but their incidents are as fresh in my mind as if I had read them yesterday. And so, after reading all of these stories together, Byron, Percy, and I, we decided that we would each write our own ghost story, being poets and writers after all, just to share with each other. And it was then that the idea of the modern Prometheus first began to take shape. I busied myself to think of a story to rival those which had excited us to this task, one that would speak to the mysterious fears of our nature and to awaken thrilling horror, one that would curdle the blood, make the reader dread to look around, and quicken the beatings of the heart. If I did not accomplish these things, my ghost story would be unworthy of its name. And so then, my imagination, unbidden, possessed and guided me, gifting the successive images that arose in my mind. I saw the pale student of an Albert Arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together, and I saw the phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, begin to show signs of life, and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would any human effort be to mock the Creator. Percy was especially enchanted with the story, and with his encouragement, I completed an entire novel for publication, and the first edition of Frankenstein was released to the public in 1818, though we chose to publish it anonymously at first, and my name was left off as its author. Thankfully, in 1821, a republication finally bore my name on its cover. And now, looking back in this way, it feels as though Frankenstein was a monument to those happy days in Switzerland, some of the happiest days of our lives. Though, as time went on, as it must, Percy and I faced many more scandals and many more tragedies. And there were many that I faced alone. I remember how sorrow flooded in when I learned that my older sister had taken her own life. And those storms of anguish came again and again, each time we lost one of our little children. Only our youngest, named after his father, would survive his childhood. And I loved being a mother. So each loss drew me further and further into this miserable depression, and further away from Percy, who, oh, it pains me to say, because I know how these things caused him endless heartache as well, but he had many affairs alongside me until his death in 1822, when he drowned. Still, his memory is crowned with the best, the most colorful, the most golden of our romance. And you may find this morbid, but I took some pains to preserve his heart in the pages of a poem that he had written, and I kept it in my desk. And in this way, he is with me for the rest of my life. And so, in reflecting on all of these shadows of my past, I know that I can look back and say that my life has been a tapestry of love, loss, and literature. And I am proud to have woven it, thread by thread. And through it all, I've had to endure in the struggle to maintain my reputation as well as my independence and learning. So, I have walked a very fine line between social scrutiny about my unladylike pursuits and, more seriously, my associations with radical thinkers, but I don't understand why I would shy away from speaking truth to power. Certainly, I intend for my mother's legacy to live on through me, with her commitment to justice for women, especially education. I also intend to prove the product of that education through my work. And my other novels, The Last Man, Matilda, Valperga, they too explore different complexities of human nature, but it is Frankenstein which endures. As you know, or as you should know, Victor's creature, born from my imagination, has taken on a life entirely of his own. But I can say for now that that is a testament to the power of storytelling, to this human need to confront and tame the unknown through the most creative means anyone can find. And so now, once again, I bid my hideous progeny to go forth and prosper. I have an affection for it, for it was the child of happy days, when death and grief were but words which held no true meaning in my heart.
God knows how entirely innocent I am, but I do not pretend that my protestations should acquit me. I rest my innocence on a plain and simple explanation of the facts that have been adduced against me, and I hope the character that I have always borne will incline my judges to favorable consideration, even in circumstances that may seem doubtful or suspicious. My name is Justine Moritz, and I stand before this court, this judge, and this jury as a humble servant of the family Frankenstein, whom I have served lovingly and faithfully these past many years. Yet now I stand accused of murdering the youngest of them, little William. I truly have no idea how the events I am to relate came to pass. My heart is heartbroken, not only for the loss of our little lad, but for the sorrow it has caused the remaining Frankensteins. I owe my life to that family, especially Mrs. Frankenstein, who took me from a mother who could no longer love and care for me. I was plucked from the bonds of abuse and poverty and squalor, and given a home and an education by both Mr. and Mrs. Frankenstein. When I was old enough, I became a handmaid for my mistress, and I did my very best to care for her as she cared for me. It was I who was at her side when she moved from this world into the next. On that mournful occasion, she died calmly. You know, it is so much for the mind to persuade itself that she, who we saw every day and whose very existence seems to be a part of our own, can have departed this world forever. This was the first true heartache that touched not only my heart, but the hearts of her dear husband and beloved children. It was then that I took on more of the household duties. I made it my mission to care for the family as my mistress would have, especially caring for little William. He was only 8 years old, so in many ways I became a second mother to William. Oh, he was the pride of the entire family, so lovely and curious. His smile would warm and delight all of our hearts. Oh, and his laugh would resound throughout the house as only a child's laughter can. He was so gentle and happy. I tell you all of this so that you may know how I too loved little William. I could never wish him ill or dead. That I should stand accused as the one who snuffed the life from his young body, it breaks my heart. Because this is an action that I could never undertake. I did confess, but I confessed a lie. I confessed so that I might have absolution, but that falsehood lies heaviest on my heart more than any of my other sins. Oh, may God in heaven forgive me. I can only relate that on that tragic day, Mr. Frankenstein, his ward, Elizabeth, and his two youngest children, Ernest and William, went for a walk. The evening was calm and serene. I can well imagine William and Ernest running along ahead, playing at tag and hide and seek like they so often did. I was not at home. I was visiting the home of an aunt, and it was well after 9 when I was returning home and I met a man from the village on the road. He seemed to be in a panic. He asked me if I had seen young William, and I told him I have no knowledge of seeing William, and he said that the family had not seen him for many hours and they feared he was missing. Well, I immediately began to help in the search, calling his name and visiting all of his favorite play areas. I, like everyone else, was up all night, searching and looking and worrying. It was well into the night when I returned to our barn, and as worried as I was, sleep began to overtake me. So I thought I would sleep a little while on a bed of straw and just try to get a little rest. I know that I did fall asleep because I was sleeping fitfully, and I remember I began to dream, but that dream quickly became a nightmare. I fancied that a gentleman was leaning over me, and he was whispering, "Awake, my fairest, awake. Thy beloved is near, he who would give his life for one look of affection from thine eyes. Awake." I recall thinking I had awoken, but when I opened my eyes, I was staring into watery eyes in a face of yellow skin that was stretched so that you could see the muscles and arteries beneath, and oh, his lips were nothing but a black gash with gleaming white teeth. I remember stirring with horror, but as so often happens with nightmares, I couldn't scream or move or run. The next thing I remember is that sunlight was coming through the barn doors, and one of the maids was shaking me awake, saying they had found William. Oh, they found William dead. So when I was taken back to the home, and I was shown his tiny, lifeless body. All I could do was sob. And so I was put to bed. I guess at that time, a brooch of Mrs. Frankenstein was found in the pocket of my apron, and it was the same brooch that William had pinned to his chest the day before. So when the brooch was shown to the constable, and I could not relate how it came to be in my pocket, it was concluded that I must have led William into the woods, and in a fit of jealousy, strangled him so that I might keep the brooch for myself. I ask you, do you believe that I could be so very, very wicked? Do you condone me as a murderer? I see that you do. And I cannot convince you of my innocence. So my fate will be at the end of a noose. I do not fear death. That pang has passed. God will raise up my weakness and give me strength to endure the worst. In these last moments, I have the greatest affection for any of you who might think of me with kindness in your hearts. Oh, how wonderful the affection is of others who care for a wretch as I am. I leave a sad and bitter world.
Poor, guiltless Justine. Alas, who is safe if she be convicted of crime? I relied on her innocence as certainly as I do upon my own. Our misfortune is doubly hard to us. We have lost not only that lovely, darling boy, but this poor girl whom I sincerely loved. I see now how heavily the grief encases my poor Victor. It is a fog I fear may never lift from his shoulders. I have an odd feeling it is more than grief that weighs upon his heart, but I cannot guess at what it may be. He has been gone so many months away from us, and through reports related to us from friends, spent much of that time in feverish solitude. When he first went away, his letters were frequent and full of news of all that he was learning, and of his excitement at meeting and conversing with so many men of science. But over time, we heard from him less and less, until at last, Victor's father became alarmed and sent Victor's best friend, Henry Clairville, to look in on him. Upon his arrival, Henry found Victor wandering the streets of the city, feverish and raving of dark knowledge, ambition, and a monstrous being. With so much patience and time, Henry nursed Victor back to sanity as well as health. And knowing all this, we worried terribly what the news of William's death would do to poor Victor. But he and Henry came immediately. And Victor, like myself, was unable to believe Justine guilty of the foul crime for which she was accused and hanged. Her execution has brought about another change in him, and I fear he is on the verge of some drastic action. My heart aches for him. He is driven by some unseen force. There is an expression of despair and sometimes revenge in his countenance that makes me tremble. Oh, Victor, banish these dark passions. I long to comfort him, be his solace in these dark times, but he keeps me at arm's length, hiding behind a mask of duty and obligation. It was his mother's dearest wish upon her deathbed that Victor and I be married, and we both promised that we would. Victor wanted first to improve his education and make a name for himself before settling into domestic life. And I agreed. But as the months dragged on and Victor's health declined, I began to worry we may never say those sacred vows. For a time, I even began to wonder if perhaps Victor's moods were less about the loss of our loved ones, and began to fear perhaps he pined for a woman more refined and elegant, a lady who may have won his heart while on his travels. I could understand. It would not have surprised me. We were raised side by side as children, often referred to as cousins, though we are unrelated by blood. I could understand, as painful as it might be, if his heart had been won by a woman more mysterious than I, his companion since infancy. The companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds which seldom any later friend can obtain. But it does not always pertain to feelings of true love. Victor came swiftly to me after reading the letter and assured me there was no other woman. He said, "Sweet and beloved Elizabeth, to you alone do I consecrate my life and my endeavors for contentment." It was then he clasped both my hands and with desperation in his voice said, "I have one secret, Elizabeth, a terrible one. When relayed to you, will fill your frame with horror. I will confide my tale of misery and terror to you the day after we are to marry. But until then, I conjure you, do not mention or allude to it." Of course, I was so relieved to discover it was still I he loved and wanted that I promised. But this promise has been nagging at the back of my mind ever since. What could possibly be so horrid as to consume my beloved's conscience, to make him brood and hide away from those who love him best? This afternoon, we stood before friends and family and vowed to love each other faithfully till death do we part. While we love, while we are true to each other in this land of peace and beauty, we may reap every tranquil blessing. What can disturb our peace? Tonight should be the happiest of nights. But as darkness falls, so too do Victor's spirits. He is agitated and restless. paces from window to window, a pistol in his grip. I've been unable to calm him, and in myself beginning to grow fearful. A presentiment of evil has pervaded my soul. What is it that agitates you, dear Victor? What is it that you fear? Peace, peace, my love, he replied. This night, and all will be safe. But this night is a dreadful one. Very dreadful. Outside, the wind is rising with a vengeance. The moon has reached her summit in the heavens and has begun her descent. The clouds sweep across swifter than the vulture hiding her rays. And suddenly, a heavy storm of rain descends. And though there is a fire, I shiver. Victor rushes to me and wraps a throw around my shoulders, insisting I should be tucked into bed. He promises to join me soon. Sleep does not come. The storm outside mirrors my inner turmoil. I strain to hear Victor's footsteps. Instead, I detect a slight noise over by the window. My heart is beating. Suddenly, the window is filled with an enormous and misshapen form. My breath catches. All is quiet for a moment, and then...
Great God! Why am I here to relate the destruction of the best hope and the purest creation on earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down, and her pale and distorted features half covered by her hair. They fell, senseless. My name is Victor Frankenstein. And before I became the miserable wretch you see before you now, I was once a content, nay, happy man, with his head full of ideas and a thirst to make my mark upon this world. I was very fond of books, especially those related to nature and science. I was chiefly intrigued by the writings of Dr. Ernest Darwin, who hypothesized that all life on Earth began from one living filament. The idea of creation occupied my mind quite often, even when I was engaged in other pursuits. And on these fancies, however, I never once considered what happened to life when it ended. That was until my own heart was filled with grief at the death of my dear mother. Those first few days, without the brightness of her beloved eyes, and the sound of her voice so familiar, so dear, were hard days indeed. My father convinced me that the best way to move through my grief would be to go away to school and continue my education, as had been the plan before my mother's death. It did not take long for me to immerse myself in my studies and learn from men of science. Men who have penetrated the recesses of nature and shown how she works in her hiding places. They've discovered how the blood circulates and the nature of the air we breathe. One night, as I strolled along the shore, a magnificent storm rolled in off the ocean. On a sudden, I beheld a stream of fire issue from an old and beautiful oak. As the dazzling light vanished, the oak had disappeared, and nothing remained but a blasted stump. I was left in awe at this brilliant display of electricity and began to wonder if it could create life, just as able as it was to eliminate. For many weeks, I began to devise the idea of creating a new species who would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. I rented a small cottage which I turned into my laboratory and set to work. The world was to me a secret which I desired to divine. I spent long hours obsessively working over my creation. After days and nights of incredible labor and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering, in the course of generation and life, nay, more so, I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. Yet I still needed to construct a frame to receive it. Something like the human body with its network of fibers, muscles, and veins. I collected bones, neglected a few Moors with their worst reputation. The local slaughterhouses furnished most of my materials, and on occasion, loathsome as it was to my morality, a foray into the old churchyard was necessary after a fresh burial. It was on a dreary and dark night in November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With trembling hands and a racing heart, I sparked life into the being upon my table. As the candles and circuit flickered, I beheld the creature's first breath. Its dull, yellow eyes opened, and in that moment, my triumph turned to terror as I gazed upon its grotesque form. Its beautiful hair and teeth contrasted horribly with its watery eyes, shriveled skin, and black lips. The being that I had intended to be beautiful was instead a monstrous mockery of life. I was so repulsed by it that I fled into the night, leaving the creature to its own devices. It was then that it made its escape and disappeared into the shadows. I happened upon my friend Henri Clerval just as he was exiting the carriage that he arrived in with the sole purpose of finding me and assuring my father and Elizabeth that I would stay alive and well. Alive, yes, but this was the commencement of a nervous fever which found me for several months. During another time, Henri was my only nurse. As my health began to improve, a lingering fear took hold at the back of my mind. I had not looked upon my dreadful creation since the night I had reanimated it, and the wheels continued to spin on what happened to it. I was racked with guilt at having played God. I was blinded by ambition and the desire to prove that I could do that which had not been done before. I did not stop to consider that there was more to life than just animation. Living creatures, human beings most of all, require a soul to illuminate their character, their morals. I knew that any human who crossed paths with that monster would shrink from it in terror. It could never be truly one with mankind. Worst of all, came word of William's death. I knew upon seeing his corpse that it must have been that abomination that took him from this life. But I was not able to voice this to anyone, for fear that I would not be believed. And because of my cowardice, Justine, who was so pure, so innocent, was the next to die. Days before my marriage, the monster came to me. He had learned how to speak, and he begged of me to create a companion like himself that would not run from his hideousness. He warned that if I refused, that he would seek revenge upon me on my wedding night. And so I relented and began to create a female. But as I became closer and closer to completing the second monster, I became more and more repulsed with it and myself. She might become 10,000 times more malignant than her mate. Had I a right, for my own benefit, to inflict this future curse upon everlasting generations? No! And so I tore this new creature apart, limb by limb. And just as I completed its destruction, I looked up to find the original fiend in the doorway. The wretch saw me destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended on for happiness. He howled with devilish despair and revenge. I cried, "Devil, cease! Do not poison the air with these sounds of malice!" With an angry look, it turned to leave, saying, "I go, but I shall be with you on your wedding night." I thought it was seeking for revenge by attempting to kill me. Never did I dream that it meant my dear one, my only Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's demise was also my father's end. As his health and mind could not tolerate the death of another innocent soul. I am now consumed by a burning need for retribution. I will hunt the demon down and destroy it. I will track him to the ends of the earth and together we both shall perish! My creation has been my undoing. And I will be his!
Hateful day when I received life. Accursed creator. How could you form a monster so hideous that even you turn from me in disgust? I was born from dead flesh, sparked to life by ambition, not love. Victor Frankenstein gave me existence, not acceptance. My first memory was of the repulsion in his eyes as he fled the laboratory. Of course, in that moment, I did not know that it was me from which he fled. I knew nothing at all. However, my body was designed to learn with extreme rapidity. It took no time to learn how to use my muscles, to grasp with my hands, and walk upon my legs. I knew by instinct that I must leave the building of my birth if I were to survive. And so I journeyed through the doorway into the nightlife of the city. I had barely entered the square when children shrieked and a woman fainted. No! Ah! The whole neighborhood was roused. Some fled, some attacked, until grievously bruised by stones and other missile-type weapons, I was able to escape to the open country. I knew then that I must stay out of the sight of humans, feeding on berries or vegetables from gardens when no one was about. I slept in open fields, near streams or under the roots of trees. Sometimes, in extreme weather, I could take shelter in an empty barn or shed. One day, I came across a fire that had been left by some wandering beggars. I was overcome with delight at the warmth it provided. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, only to quickly pull it back again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause could produce such opposite effects. I felt light, and hunger, and thirst, and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. Gradually, I was able to distinguish each object, sight, and scent for its own uniqueness. I began to grow a fondness for the beauty of nature. I gazed at it all with a kind of wonder. Moving slowly, as my path was enlightened, I fixed my eyes on it all with pleasure. As I awoke to the sensations around me, I began to experience a new sensation. I came to realize that I was lonely. In nature, each animal and bird had a mate. The flowers and trees grew in clumps, the leaves and vines intertwined with each other. At this time, I could not speak. Sometimes, I wished to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me only frightened me into silence again. One day, I came upon a cottage, tucked snugly in the woods. Adjoining the cottage on one side was a low hovel constructed of wood, just large enough to crawl inside. It was bare, save for some clean straw, protected from the rain and snow, and gave me shelter from the wind. I determined that I would make this my place of refuge. I soon learned that the cottage was occupied by a family consisting of an old man who was blind but very wise, his lovely daughter, his son, and his son's beautiful wife. From the safety of my hovel, I was able to observe them hour after hour and learn their ways. I watched as they planted crops in their garden, cut and gathered wood, and mended their clothing. In the evenings, they would sing songs or read from books by the firelight to entertain one another. By degrees, I made a discovery of even greater importance. I came to learn that these people could communicate with a series of articulate sounds. This was indeed a godlike science. I really began to pay attention to how these sounds were used, and after many passings of the moon, I was able to speak as fluently as these cottagers. I grew such affection for this loving little family that I decided that I would make myself known to them. By now, I could speak eloquently, and I'd even taught myself to read from their books. My loneliness made me long to join in their fireside stories and songs. I only hoped that they would look past my hideousness and welcome me as a friend. My heart beat quick. This was the hour and moment of trial. Who can describe the horror of beholding me? The daughter fainted. The wife ran from the cottage. The son dashed forward, knocking me to the ground and striking me violently with the old man's cane. I could have torn him limb from limb, but I refrained. I picked myself up off the floor and quickly exited the cottage. Cursed Creator, why did I live? I was benevolent and good, but misery has made me a fiend. I determined in that moment that I would find my Creator and insist that he create another, so that I would no longer be lonely. I journeyed to his home, where I came across a young boy, but as soon as he saw me, he began to scream, "Monster! You rat!" I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. I knew what I had done was wrong, but I no longer cared. Who among the myriad of men would take pity or assist me, and should I treat my enemies with kindness? No! From that moment on, I declared everlasting war on the species. I would only relent if Victor Frankenstein would consent to make me a partner, so that we could live together far from man. As repulsed as he was, he agreed. But on the night that he was to bring my other half to life, I watched in agony as he destroyed her. And so I took my revenge by killing his true love. Just as I sought revenge, so too did Frankenstein. He has pursued me these many months to the remotest corners of the globe, arriving here in the frozen tundra and icebergs of the Arctic. But Victor Frankenstein shall not have his revenge, for he has succumbed to this frigid land and lies dead. Should I be considered the only criminal, when all mankind has sinned against me? It is true, I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the innocent. I have devoted my Creator, one who was worthy of love and admiration among men, to misery. I have pursued him to ruin, and now he lies white and cold in death. But fear not that I will be the instrument of further mischief. I will collect my funeral pyre and consume to ashes this miserable frame, so that no other unhallowed, curious wretch should create another such as I have been. my ashes will be blown into the sea by the wind. Farewell!